which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there a motion for the approval of the meeting minutes of
So moved.
Thursday?
I second the motion.
Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Okay. Jim, Denise?
I think they're here for different reasons.
I'm here
Oh.
for different reasons.
Oh, I'm
If you'd like
sorry.
to talk with
Okay.
Jim first,
Jim,
and
you
I'm
want to
first.
talk about a short sale,
Okay.
which we don't want to do. Go ahead.
I went out and took a couple pictures yesterday, too. This property's been vacant for, I think, about 3 years. And gentleman, Mr. Scarlett's
Thank you.
been trying to buy it, and been working with the banks, and the banks have kind of disappeared, but finally they've come to an agreement on what it would take for them to release their liens. As you can see, that there's tarp on the roof. Actually, the adjoining property cuts into the porch there, so it's really kind of a tough property anyway. The Portage County liens were all rehab liens. They were shipped 2004, I think, was what it was.
I think 5 and 6.
That's a 5 and 6. And it was used for septic system and rehab of the property. The owner, Mr. Uglow, left the property, I think, in 2012, and it's been sitting vacant up to this point.
Were those things taken care of when the money was loaned to them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
On the third page, second page from the back, it says that in 2013, the collection letter over 90 days past due. And then 11/4, collection letter over 90 days past due. And so my question is, why would we in 2005 and 6 then loan them up to $30,000, a little over $30,000 if there weren't?
This, if you look at it, and I probably, I don't know if I should have included that or not. It looks like one of the loans was originally booked, if you look up in the upper right-hand corner under the loan number, that's a NeighborWorks loan, that's not a Portage County loan. And it looks like it was booked in error because it's at a zero balance. So it looks to be something that happened at booking, because it was set up as an amortizing loan and then cleared out. So this loan doesn't exist. And it was a NDS NeighborWorks. I don't know. I wasn't there at the time, but I'm guessing that probably there was funding that was held up, and so they used NeighborWorks money until the funding was available. But there was no delinquency. The way these work is that if they apply for the loan, and if they meet the income guidelines, and if the properties need the rehab, then the loans are done, as long as the property taxes are current at the time of the loan. I think now they do them as 80% forgivable. At this time, they were done as a full lien with no forgiveness. So.
I guess it's hard for me to understand why we would accumulate this debt when it says payable upon sale, but the sale isn't giving us any money, $3,000. We loaned them almost $31,000, and we're getting $3,600 back. I guess it's better than nothing, but
Yeah, that's what happens when you're.
yeah.
And these are done without any they don't do a loan to value, so there's no appraisal done, and they just, the purpose is to rehab the properties. So you could be at 200% loan to value, and unless those first mortgages are paid off.
On a
you're-
property like this?
Yeah.
But there is accountability, you're saying, Jim, that they do use this money for what they borrowed it for? I mean, someone goes out and checks?
Oh, no, it's supervised by the construction crew. They sub it out, they contract it, they supervise the work that's done before any contractors
The
are paid.
person that's buying it is the next door neighbor, did you say?
His family owned property around there. He's got some health issues, and he's got a rather large house in Edinburgh, and he's going to sell that and move back to this property, and it's a much more manageable property, and it's close to his family and so forth. If it wasn't him, I don't know if we'd have a buyer for the property at all. The property is in such rough shape that the banks couldn't even foreclose on it. It's just been sitting there.
So the person that lives next door, that's going to move back, is just going to level this most likely?
No, he's going to live in it.
He's going to live in it?
He's going to fix it up and live in it.
How much is the house, how much is the value of the property?
30, the realtor said 30 to 35. Key Bank did an appraisal. I couldn't get my hands on the appraisal. They wouldn't release it to me. But their appraisal came in at 35.
And what?
35.
It's not Key Bank's, but.
Key Bank had an appraisal done before they accepted the short sale.
And how much?
It's 35. I didn't get my hands on it, but that's the number I was given.
It's hard for me to understand this program. This is from our revolving loan program.
That's not my area, but it's a CHIP grant, so I think it comes from the federal government, and it's solely for rehabbing properties that are in need of, for low to moderate income people.
You do have guidelines as to when you will do this, correct?
Yeah,
What are those guidelines?
it's their income guidelines, so they have to be low to moderate income families.
Mhm. And what restrictions do you have on giving them? I mean, if they're behind in their taxes and they're behind on payment.
If they're behind in their taxes, it's a no-go.
They don't get it?
Right.
And if they're behind on their payments to the bank for their loan?
Then
do
that's
they
a
still
no-go
get it?
too.
Hmm?
That's a no-go too.
Okay. And you're saying that on this page where it says they got 90-day notice?
That was an error, a booking error, and I'm guessing that they probably used NDS funds until the CHIP funds became available, because it was paid off.
And we know that from up here?
Mhm.
Did you say?
It's that, if you see the loan number NW00, that's NeighborWorks, so that's NDS money. I probably confused the fact by attaching that, but I didn't want to.
Yeah.
I didn't want to omit anything.
You know what would really help us, I think, is when you send things like this, if there could be a narrative as to what the rationale is, so that we understand it. Because when I first looked at this, I couldn't figure it out. And that's why I'm thankful that you're here.
Sure.
Because I feel like we're rubber stamping something, we're not really protecting public money
Mhm.
by accepting 3,000. The bank makes out much better.
If it was foreclosed on, went to sheriff's sale, and if it was appraised at 35, it would go at 2/3 of that. So the first mortgage holder would still probably get something. We'd recover the delinquent property taxes, but you'd be out attorney fees and
So you're
this
saying
probably
it
would.
might be worse if it went to foreclosure?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Do they have delinquent taxes on the property?
Mhm.
more than what we're getting.
Right.
Are those
All
being
delinquent,
paid?
all delinquent taxes are the first lien, so
First,
yeah.
they're the first thing
So they
paid.
get that, and then Green Tree gets it, and then Key Bank.
Key Bank, and then if you see the HUD settlement statement, it says
Yeah.
it's an estimate, but whatever's left is what comes to the county, and that's the estimated amount
It's
based on,
about 3,600.
yeah.
And totally, Portage County has the sum total of those listings on the top here,
30,950.
Mhm.
30,950.
Right.
And we're going to get a big 3,600 back.
Yeah.
It's not a good investment, Maureen.
Right?
Said it's not a good investment.
Well, no, it seems like overwhelmingly every time, none of these are. That's the,
Well,
yeah, well, and I know the intent is
It's
not
not.
and
return on the investment.
and you're seeing
Yeah.
the downside,
Yeah.
but there's
There's many
tons
upsides.
of, right, there's tons of these on the books that
Sure.
they've upgraded the properties and they're paying their taxes.
They don't
and-
come before us, right?
Right, yeah, we don't bring a list of, these
Yeah.
are the ones that
They're
are good.
the ones that work out, right?
Right. It's, you know,
Understood. Yeah.
as an,
That's a valid point.
as an old country lender, it's, you know, you look at, they always point to your delinquencies, but
Yeah, I
not
think
the good ones.
unnerving part to me is the ones that make out are all, well, and you're a business or you're not, are the banks.
Well, the Key Bank's taken probably a $7,000 hit.
Right.
If they hadn't agreed to that,
No,
the
understood.
county wouldn't have gotten anything, but
Right, right,
we said we've got to get something,
yeah,
so,
yeah, a green tree.
yeah.
Well, thank you for coming.
Yeah.
And could I suggest that maybe a narrative or something when these come
Sure.
forward so that we have a better understanding?
Sure, be glad to. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Denise, you're up.
Did you want to do a journal entry on this one?
Oh,
so we
yes.
can conclude?
You can have that back. Look at your ledgers, yeah. Hello, Denise.
Good morning.
I like your beads.
Oh, my. This is how I get in and out of the office. That's all.
Oh, my God, I guess I should wear my glasses in here.
No, it's
I thought
fine.
it was like an Indian,
Oh,
I
no.
thought you were
No,
making a joke.
the piece around your
No.
neck.
no, actually, it's my obsession with Harry Potter. It's a keychain with the
understand.
fob. And it's, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I thought that was probably a
That's all.
woven.
No, it could be. I was asleep when I got ready this morning, so that's possible.
Let me get your packet here, prosecutor. I got you.
You're telling us we shouldn't meet with these folks, right?
Which folks?
The residents or the operator or whatever?
Oh, on the Ruma?
Yeah.
Because we have a current Ruma, you are welcome to meet with those people, with the residents out there, and I understand they have some good faith complaints and issues. I'm not saying anyone is not misguided or anything. I'm sure it's a burden on them to see and hear these trucks. But we do have a Ruma. I wouldn't want you to be in a position where it's perceived or the vendor could raise an issue that we were somehow in breach of that Ruma agreement. But I do understand your desire to listen to people. I would ask that, today's day and age of cell phones, if in fact they're getting
Take a big
pictures of trucks using the wrong route, or trucks speeding, or trucks doing any of those things, take some pictures. I do know the county engineer is putting up some signs so that trucks, because these are individual drivers who may or may not be even aware there's a Ruma. They're putting up signs to say this is the authorized route, or no trucks, no, and I can't remember the name of the company right now, but no trucks on this road, things like that, so they are aware that they must use a particular route.
I thought it was really great for the person who's kind of overseeing that whole operation to hear what we're hearing from citizens. So I'm thinking if we have a meeting, if we just listen and let the citizens tell them, I think they'll become painfully aware of the problems because they are not using the authorized route. They are speeding. They are starting early in the morning, like 5 a.m. There's constant noise, and I just feel like if the person overseeing the operation can hear from citizens directly what we're hearing, that maybe then they can have, better address the issues.
Now, if you chose to have a meeting or arrange or host a meeting with residents and invite the company, that's your choice, of course. That would, hopefully they would show up, and that, you're right, they could then hear these issues themselves. That's completely up to you.
And we wouldn't have to say anything. I mean,
True.
we could host them.
Of course, the township could do the same thing.
Yeah.
They could host a meeting. Ashley's
Well, that
host.
might be a better idea.
I mean, that's an option. The township hosts the meeting, township asks these representatives to be there.
Well, the key becomes whether or not the company will be there.
Well, right, although they're
Yes, sir.
again, I'm not going to advocate on their behalf, but
Sure.
I mean, their best interest is to keep everybody happy as well. They want to operate as peacefully as they can as well.
Or we could jointly host it, commissioners and township trustees.
That's, again, your discretion, yeah.
Because I think the public feels like we're not helping, that they call and complain to us, and that we just say, we're, shrug our
We
shoulders.
can't do anything.
By having us host the meeting, and I think in conjunction with the township would be a good idea, at least they know we're doing what we can. And we don't have to make comment during that meeting. We just have to allow
Facilitate the discussion.
facilitated discussion between the operator and the community so that they can hear all of the complaints that we're hearing.
Where would that be held, Kathleen?
I think it should be held in the neighborhood, maybe at the
That's
township trustees'
Okay.
office.
So we need to communicate
Meeting.
with them as to,
Yeah.
and who calls this company and who does that? Do we
Well,
do
I
that,
mean,
or-
if you're going to jointly host it, then I think a joint letter to them, asking them to attend, maybe followed up with a phone call. Who that representative is, I'm sure either Mr. Marazzi or Anthony could give you that information.
Yeah.
Do you think, though, how much of it is the trucks from the RUMA, as many as trucks that are going up? Am I right on this, for the injection well?
Well, again, the rumor is for the injection well. It is an injection well. This is,
I thought.
the rumors are usually for, and
Drilling.
required for drilling.
Right.
This company did agree to a RUMA for purpose of the injection well. They didn't need to, but they did.
They're not bound by it.
Well, they're bound by the agreement. Now they've entered into it. They didn't have to enter into it. I think it's, one of the things that's tough to explain to anybody, I mean, I live on a township road, so I understand that, is it's a public road, and trucks can go on it all the time if they have a permit for the weight. One of the things is if these trucks are overweight, or if there's a risk they're overweight, a truck, any truck, must ask for a permit from the county engineer. The county engineer, in these cases, will say, we're not giving you individuals, truck drivers, the permit without the RUMA in place. That gives them some assurances that the road gets repaired, that there's a flow of traffic under certain controls, and so forth. That's what was done in this circumstance. But again, whether or not those trucks are overweight is a question. Otherwise, they can go up and down the road all they
The
want.
RUMA does allow them to be overweight. This agreement.
It does allow them to be overweight if they are. I'm not sure, and one of the things that no one's been able to answer for me, because the county engineer, in my discussions with the county engineer department, as well as with various vendors that do this, whether it was Sunoco or this company here. Those water trucks, they're I'm not talking the giant semis. I'm talking basically the box
tankers.
trucks, the tankers. They're not overweight.
Yeah.
Even full, they're not overweight on a township road. So they didn't need the permit. If that's the case, they didn't need the permit in the first place.
Do they, though, does the company have, I guess, exclusivity, is that the word? The drivers don't necessarily work for them. They could be subcontractors, right?
Well, they could be, yeah. They're not
And
necessarily
therefore-
employees of the company, but that company is ultimately responsible for that truck, that
Well,
driver.
are they, even though there's, what is that, the Interstate Commerce Act that protects, I mean, they can haul anything they want in, so does that
Within weight
negate-
limits.
Does that negate the weight limit?
No, because the driver is,
Still responsible?
yeah, again, in the interest of the company, is not going to hire that driver even as an independent contractor if they're going to cause problems for the company. The company doesn't want problems. They would just want to make money.
Sure.
You know, that's all they really want to do.
Well, it seems like, again, as Kathleen pointed out, the residents would appreciate that meeting, and we did tell them, I think, when they were in here, when was that, that we would try to arrange it.
Yeah, and so that's your discretion to do that. Maybe, again, host it with the township and give people a
Yeah, it may,
chance,
it
a
may
voice.
spark, whatever, on the part of the company that they'll.
So Amy, would you ask Deb to put together a letter?
Excuse me.
Are you here with Todd also? Or are you together, so. Is she here with you?
No, when we have the 911 meeting afterwards,
Oh,
in a little while. Are there any other questions regarding the Roma issue at all? Okay. Just going through my sideway list,
Let me get your side view. I got it.
you got it? Okay. Number 1 and 2, I have no updates. Number 3, and I've given that to Dave Brogue to take a look at. He usually responds to Deb on those things. The continuing levy for DD, we recommended that Deb let the superintendent for DD know that this must be a replacement levy, not a renewal levy, when the time has been changed. What the board decided to do was make this a continuing levy, same millage, but a continuing levy instead of a expiring after 5 years. That makes it a replacement levy, and their board is going to need to meet to pass a resolution calling it a replacement levy, getting a new certification. And I know they're looking at an August 5th deadline. So it was recommended that Deb contact them to let them know, because they're probably going to have a special meeting to do that very quickly. The ongoing lawsuit regarding trees that were allegedly cut down for an ODOT project that's being handled by outside counsel. The sales tax ballot issue, I didn't know if you had any questions on that. And the library one, again, Dave Brogue said that one was okay to
Yeah,
put on
I saw
that.
that.
I have a question on number 2.
Yes.
The financial network, do we have any choices about this? We have deferred comp through County Commissioners Association.
The financial network was one that was another option that was used by or initiated by another board of commissioners. If you chose not to use them anymore, we'll make that an option for county employees. I don't think it negates current employees that are using them, but it would say that's no longer an option for current employees. Again, that's up to you.
Yeah, I recall it because I was on the board when we did a few,
Yeah.
and it was
Just giving people another option for
Right.
investing their money.
predicated on, well, there's no need to go into that, but there were people that were using it then.
Yeah.
suppose they had a higher, they were very happy with the attorney.
You're right. With respect to correspondence list, the only thing was was the RUMA, and I think I had some correspondence there regarding Hiram and the current solid waste district contract, and there was a 90-day provision. I was just pointing that out to you. That's all that my purpose there was. So, on my regular agenda, that's all I have.
There's nothing we need to do then with the number 2.
The financial network one?
Yeah.
Number 3. I think Dave was going to give you some comments about that. I don't know if this was a new program or additional options, or if they were making some changes.
What they want to do is add to it. There's the regular program that we've had for several years, and now this time they want to add to it. It says we're now offering an additional deferred comp plan to your employees. And then it goes on to explain that. I think we should look at it carefully because we're endorsing it essentially when we.
That's
And
pretty much what you're doing.
I have heard, I don't know if this is factual, but I've heard that it's of greater risk. And so I kind of like to have someone look at this so we could have some assurance if we approve this as one of our plans that it meets minimum guidelines in terms of investment. I don't want to be in the position of saying, I think the employees feel like we're endorsing it when we do this.
Sure.
So maybe we could refer it to Todd and have him look at it and try to get more information.
I'll let Dave know to send whatever comments he has to
Yes,
Todd
if
as
he
well.
would.
as to
At the
Dave.
time, I agree, it was higher risk, but that was something that would be between the investment advisor and the participant. If they opted for higher risk or higher return, that's what was presented in one of the commissioners at the time.
But it'd be my impression, if we endorse it, we do endorse it if we make it one of our plans. Then our employees may think, well, if the commissioners have endorsed it, it's probably safe.
Well, I'm sure you're right on that, except the employees came to us and wanted it. They wanted to be able to have a higher risk. Well, I mean, they understood that to get a higher return.
But maybe a small number, like 3 or 4 or 5.
Oh, it was a small number, but
Yeah.
again, I think at the time, trying to think back, we had, I think, one conversation with, it was dubious then to do it. Maybe it was more so on my part, but I was convinced.
Well,
that
it was
we
an
should-
option.
we should
I
give
think you
an
made it
option.
clear, at least then, the
Right.
board made it clear that the employee was taking
right.
on their own risk.
And now, we're in a different situation because now they are adding to the program.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's a higher
Yeah.
level of risk or just
Sure,
or
sure.
what the reasons for the addition.
Well, the people that are in it, I suppose, that I think, Kathleen, may be the point of whatever, not contention, but whether to grant them to include that portion or just to let it, be as it is.
It says it's not subject to RISA in here.
Yeah, it's a higher risk kind of thing. It really is, which means you'll get probably a better return most of the time.
Right.
You risk some
Yeah.
things losing,
Right.
but
Okay, any other questions? If not,
So we're just referring this to Todd for more input in
yeah, and I've made a note to make sure when Dave does make his comments, he sends them to Todd as well as
Yeah.
to
Is there a
Deb.
time where this has to be done?
not that
Like it-
Todd, I mean, that's fine, but
I don't
I
recall.
would,
I
I'd like
think
one
one
Dave's
knows
comments.
that.
All right,
Yeah.
His comments. Okay, is that it? You said regular, do you need an executive session?
No,
Oh, okay, that's good.
no, I don't need I just meant on my
Oh, yeah,
agenda
all right.
as opposed to
Okay, all right.
whatever's next, the 911. I think that was what we were going to talk about, the 911 issue with
Okay,
AT&T.
are you
That
going to
was
be here
next.
for the
Yes,
Motorola?
that's what I'm here for.
Okay.
Yeah.
good. Well then, Todd,
Yeah.
did you get my comments? I sent emails about,
About the 911, yes, I did.
yeah,
I did.
and I shared them with other.
Yeah. They're here. Is Motorola the same thing as AT&T? Or
No.
different? Totally different.
Yeah,
Okay.
Motorola is
Totally
a
different.
less favorable option right now, it appears. I
Are
guess,
we on the agenda on the
This is the,
discussion on,
This
are
is
we
the
on discussion?
Motorola, well, this is.
right after mine was
Right.
prosecutor and Department of Budget and Financial Management.
Right, as a result of.
And that's for the Motorola thing?
Well, it was a little bit of, I mean, the Motorola has to do with the 911
Yeah, right.
updating,
Yeah.
updating of the
And
911.
AT&T,
AT&T has proposed one way, Motorola is proposing something else.
do we have any backup information?
Yep,
Yes, quite a bit.
that was star next to the prosecutor, there's a whole packet.
This one, okay, I got it, thanks.
I didn't print out the entire Motorola document, but I know it is, how did you put it, less favorable than AT&T.
yeah,
Well, when I read that, AT&T is not charging anything for the Cleveland host and the Columbus host, but I believe Motorola is, and that amounts to $420,000. If you subtract that from the total price, unless I'm misunderstanding this whole thing, then it makes Motorola competitive or almost slightly less.
Okay, and I would, two comments. One, competitive bid is not required when updating 911 services. Number two, the other factor that I don't know if Motorola has outlined in their package is that there's probably some other equipment issues, because currently we're using AT&T. And if you go to a different vendor, there's probably equipment and other kinds of cost factors in there, should you decide to do that. I mean, it's changing a lot. Not that that's good or bad, I'm just saying it's changing a lot on the system.
We had, our most recent meeting was a meeting last week that was hosted by EMA at the Justice Center. And again, you should have background on that. And that was just a discussion with several users, I'm going to call them, because they were not the decision makers for those jurisdictions. But I thought as a result of that, Motorola was not going to be considered.
the leaning of that group is to use AT&T.
Yeah.
There's several issues in this whole process, and it's part of why I still wanted to meet, to bring the commissioners on board. Obviously, the state is changing the requirements for what you have to have in terms of equipment for 911. It has been frustrating, from my understanding, getting the state to be specific as to what that equipment must entail. So many communities are confused as to what they should buy, and so a lot of the providers are stepping up with a lease option, so that you can lease the equipment throughout this interim period until it's clear what needs done. And maybe leasing will still be the option, or maybe at that point you could buy your equipment. As the sheriff and the other communities look at this, I think they are all agreeing that leasing is the best route to go for now. In the leasing, AT&T presented their option, Motorola presented theirs. operationally, my understanding is they were both similar enough that there wasn't anything compelling that way. Price-wise, AT&T is more attractive. And so the leaning of that group is to use AT&T.
Clarify that group, because it was
Well-
Streetsboro's chief.
It's the users of
The
the group.
users.
It's
Yeah,
the
right,
people
right.
who
Yeah.
are
That's
answering,
important.
it's the
That's
dispatchers,
yeah,
it's the
very
fire
important.
departments,
Right.
it's the police departments that are using it.
Yeah.
But Ravenna wasn't included?
Ravenna has been invited. They have been to some meetings. Ravenna was unsure what direction they want to go, and is still, my understanding, unsure what direction they want to go, as is Kent State, as is the city of Kent. So some of them that are unsure haven't attended every meeting. There are two communities in particular, Streetsboro and Aurora, that wish we would have done it in
Sure.
January.
Yeah,
So you have that dichotomy going there.
And part of that confusion is that by January of 2016, we must reduce the number of PSAPs once again. And so I'm sure the Ravennas are at that point of, are we going to be a PSAP, or do we have to merge with somebody else? So should we be leasing anything and doing anything if we're not going to be a PSAP? I'm sure that's part of the equation.
Correct, yeah.
And Ryan went to Columbus the day after the meeting, and I thought, from what he sent us, it was even more confounding after he found out about the
Well, there's
hosted
still,
solution having to be a piece.
well, some
Doesn't
communities
it
had
just make any
hoped.
sense? I mean, these acronyms
Yeah.
are flying around here like.
Some communities had hoped that this leased equipment itself was going to be considered the only PSAP,
Yeah.
and that everyone else was going to be considered a dispatch. And what Ryan found out is that is not necessarily the case. So it doesn't mean that hosting interferes with the reduction of PSAPs. It just means hosting by itself is not the solution.
So Portage County, by hosting it, would not become the PSAP for the
No,
county.
agreed.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I
You'd still
understand-
have three others besides Portage
I
County.
understand the urgency of this. The problem is that the equipment they have is no longer being supported by the company they purchased it from. So if something breaks down, they have to scramble to try to find used parts and so forth. So there's a desperate hurry to get this done. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, the state has already hired a director for the, I've forgotten, they're calling it ESANet provisions. So they're moving forward rather quickly now. My thinking is that we ought to wait to see what the state is going to produce, if it's going to be, if we're going to hear from them in the next month or two. I have a call in to CCAO to find out if they have any information about how long it will be before the state will let us know what their guidelines are going to be. That's one thing. The other thing that concerns me is if Streetsboro and Aurora want to do the hosting, they should do it. Do it on their own. We don't need to do it for them. And why would we?
Well,
want to
because
do it?
AT&T is telling them
Right, they've-
they'll only
they've-
contract with one entity.
Exactly.
With the county.
You pick which entity it is, Portage, within Portage County,
Well,
but
then-
they'll only contract, so whoever else, once they contract for, let's say they contract with Aurora, as you say, if Aurora steps up and says,
Right.
okay, I'm gonna be the contracting party, I contract. If anybody else within Portage County is gonna go with AT&T,
They have to
we
go
must go
subcontract
through
with
Aurora, we must have a contract
And
with
and that
Aurora.
led to the question, which Todd brought up as at the, what I call the after the meeting with the sheriff primarily, that if that would be the solution, the county, well, actually, the county would have all the liability. So there would have to be subcontracts
Contracts with the
with these
others.
entities. And again, the people that make that decision, the mayors, the city manager, the councils, were not in that meeting. So certainly, we value and weigh very heavily and respect the users, but I think we're going to have to almost regroup and, as Kathleen said, wait for the state. The state, when Brian went down the next day, they haven't issued anything finite. And I think I put that in my email. Until we have something in black and white in front of us as to the number, like on the
Yeah,
hosted
and,
solution.
and so I see your point in doing anything
Yeah.
final at
Right.
this point. But I think the lease option that both companies are offering at this point gets us through that interim period. So I think the theory, at least, is that it satisfies Sheriff Aurora Streetsboro that if your system breaks down, we're going to be there to support it. But at the same time, it doesn't commit you long-term.
Yeah, but what about the money? Because they
Well-
are all receiving money, and are they going to say, okay, county, you take all the money?
The original plan, and this is where the commissioners need to decide what you are comfortable with, so that when these other meetings happen,
Yeah,
your staff can accurately explain to these other groups
sure.
what the county is willing and not willing to do. The other groups have their ideas of what they want the county to do,
Right.
and that is all that has happened in these meetings.
Right.
The county needs to begin providing some feedback back, in my opinion, as to what it is willing to do.
Right.
If the county is willing to host, then that's not, it's not up to the mayor of Streetsboro to decide whether we host, it's up to the commissioners. It will be up to the mayor of Streetsboro to decide if he wants to subcontract with us or if he wants to go his own route.
She.
Or she, I apologize.
No, Streetsboro is in there.
So, but the commissioners need to decide if that's the option they want presented, or if we want to wait to
But
see what the state
You're
is
asking us to make a
doing.
decision in the blind. We didn't attend those meetings. I didn't attend.
Well, that's
I attended
why-
all the other
yeah.
meetings. I've gone to meetings in Columbus. For some reason, I wasn't even notified of this meeting, so I don't know. All I know is from what happened in previous meetings, which was similar. And the thing is, if Aurora and Streetsboro want to host it, they can do that. If we don't need AT&T to tell us that we have to do this, we don't have to do this.
Well, you're correct. And if that's the direction the commissioners are going, that needs expressed in these meetings, because that group thinks we're going a different way, is my impression.
How could they get that
The-
impression?
Well, because they've been
Because
talking.
Ryan has been meeting with those
The-
users. And by the way, Kathleen, I sent you an email explaining what happened in that meeting.
Yeah, after it was over.
The key, though, is,
Well, then Ryan didn't inform you what was going to
Right,
be.
I know that's beside the point.
No, it isn't beside the point, because you're taking issue with something that we haven't decided as a board. Vicki has, has to contribute to this too. We may decide that we want to go that route, but
Well,
again,
even
my
if we-
main concern is the financial liability to the county.
well, and I said in that email, there's really kind of three issues here. Even if you don't want to host for everyone, you do need
Right.
to address the needs
For the sheriff.
of the sheriff's
Yeah.
PSAP.
Yes.
And it is currently operating under equipment that is no longer under a service agreement. The sheriff, I believe, feels that the AT&T hosted option is his best alternative. So even if no one else would enter into this contract with us, I believe the sheriff would like to. I wanted to talk with the commissioners because I don't think you're ready to make a decision because you don't necessarily have all the information. But I think what you do need to start identifying is what information you want your staff to begin gathering so that that discussion can happen. We have the issue of how are we going to address the sheriff's needs. That needs answered.
That's number one, I think.
After that, if we're going to contract with AT&T, I feel it's in the county's best interest to hold the master contract, so to speak, in our hands rather than letting Aurora do it or some other entity. We're the larger entity, we have more at stake, and if PSAPs are absorbed, there's a good chance the county will be the one absorbing the smaller ones. That's my opinion, that's for you to decide.
I don't think the sheriff feels comfortable with hosting taking on other PSAPs. I spoke to him yesterday, and I don't think that he's comfortable with that. So we need to meet with the sheriff. But I would like to find out how long before the state makes up their mind. And if it appears that it's not going to be for a while, and we feel urgency in doing something, maybe host for a short period of time. Why 5 years? That's a long time.
Well, AT&T has an investment in this equipment, and 5 years is their proposal to make it worth it for them. Again, if we're going to go with AT&T for just the sheriff, then Joanne and Ryan can begin those negotiations with AT&T and talk about reduced time, talk about what flexibility AT&T has. Right now, we're not even sure we should begin that route. So that's kind of where we're at. I do feel that the commissioners have not been involved in what ultimately is going to be a county decision, and so that's why I wanted to proceed with this level, to bring it to your attention and to begin getting direction of what do you need, what do you want gathered, and what are you comfortable and not comfortable with, so that your staff can begin accurately representing at this meetings what it is we're willing or not willing to do.
Tom, let me ask you this. If Aurora would just then get impatient and they just go forward and have a contract with AT&T, and that's going to prevent us from,
Yes, it will.
Well, that is what AT&T
Because
is saying.
AT&T is saying that. They
Yes.
won't enter into a contract. Once they
Well,
enter
we would
into
have
it
to
with Aurora,
subcontract
they
with
won't.
Well, they won't enter it into Aurora unless Aurora is willing to accept Streetsboro and others, right?
Well,
And she's
Aurora,
asking if Aurora does it on their own.
if Aurora does it on their own, then Aurora, as you said,
yeah.
Aurora is taking all the financial burden. Okay, so Aurora's going to be in the same dilemma you are of, wait a second, how can I take on that financial burden if I don't know if everybody else is going to piggyback with me?
So that would be-
Because AT&T is saying, I'm only going to contract with one entity. They don't care which one it is, but they're only going to contract.
The
So if it
original-
is Aurora, then we're going to be, if we go with AT&T, we're going to have to piggyback back onto Aurora.
And there are things that came up, I think, our initial meeting here, which was, what, a year or so ago? I think one of the users who was a fireman at the time said, Commissioners, what are you going to do about it? And it's your responsibility to provide us all the equipment and everything else. So my only point in that is, one piece of it at least does not solidify the total cost of this thing. And again, those PSAPs right now receive money. Are they willing to kick that
The
bad
current,
word, give it all to the county and let that be distributed, and then also sign an agreement for any extraneous costs that they're going to pay for those?
that
That's
was
what
the
Todd
current,
said.
that was the current discussion, was
Right.
that, let's say they made 15,000.
Right.
They were willing to give up their
Who is
15,000.
they? The users?
Let's say it's Streetsboro. If Streetsboro wants to contract with
Yeah.
the county, Streetsboro was willing to give up their share of the 911 funds.
But that decision wasn't rendered by the mayor or council.
Well, because we haven't proposed a contract yet for them to decide on.
But I mean,
Would
but
it
they
make
have.
you feel better if each of those entities, Aurora, Streetsboro, Ravenna, the rest of them, their councils did a resolution just saying they
Yes, and I
recommend that
I
the county
believe
do
I
it, and if
suggested
the
that.
county does it, they
Right,
would be
yeah.
willing
I
to.
think I suggested that at the meeting, but by the way, one of the officers there said, Commissioners, you just need to impose a tax. And people will understand, because they understand things like that when it comes to safety. I just thought I would
Is he
share that.
talking about the sales tax that
He was
No,
talking
there's
about.
a-
it.
Jet Powers?
Right.
There's an option for a 911 fee.
Right, right, within the Ohio Revised Code, so just do it.
Okay.
I'm so tired of people telling me, just do it, just impose a tax.
I agree.
Well, and then when you say make a recommendation, that's coming from the bottom up. We have to know enough so that we can make a decision.
Right.
Otherwise, you're asking us to rubber stamp something we don't even understand. And I think one of the first things we have to know is where is the state in terms of how long before they're going to make a recommendation as to what we need, what requirements there are. If that's a short-term thing, like if we can say that we get the information within a month or two, then I think we should wait for that and not jump into this. But if they say, well, we have no idea, or it could be 6 months from now, then maybe on an interim basis, do something to assist in the hosting program is far better than trying to buy equipment. So I just think we need a lot more information before we're.
The state isn't going, well, maybe they will make a decision, but they haven't done so yet. I mean,
But
how
they
do we
did
get that
hire
answer?
someone.
How do we get that answer from the state?
Well, I
Because-
called yesterday to John Lights, who's on the committee. And so I would hope to hear from him today as to if he can give us
Well, I
information.
had put in my email, I think we need we need it in black and white. You know, verbal is wonderful. Very knowledgeable because he was up here.
Mhm.
But still, there's so much ambiguity to this, and the liability factor is huge.
Okay, then the alternatives, if the state doesn't know when they're going to give us,
Well,
then what do we do?
Well, the
B.
pressing issue right now is replacing our equipment.
yeah.
Right.
The second pressing issue is that Portage County as a whole must reduce to 4 PSAPs by January of
And
the year.
we know that for a fact. That's
Well, sort of.
sort of, okay. It
I mean,
depends.
they said that, but I don't know as though they have a finite, do they?
Well, I think they've said, the state has said you're going to reduce, whether it's to
Well,
4
they're
or
going to,
3,
but it
they're
could
not
be
sure.
one. Right, it could be
Yeah,
one.
they just don't, you're going to
Yeah.
reduce, but I think they're saying
Yeah.
that what they have said is you're going to
And that does
reduce.
confound the issue, because again, you have currently the number of PSAPs here, and if it would go to 1, again, that's a big if. We don't know that.
Wow.
But you're right. The sheriff, in my way of thinking, the sheriff is, not that the other departments aren't, of course they are, but the sheriff is our, I think, number one concern.
But would we have to enter into a contract with AT&T though to get equipment for the sheriff?
If we're going to lease it, there's 2 options. There's buy all new equipment. We currently own our current equipment. We bought it X years ago. We could buy the equipment, house it in our facility and continue that way.
Buy.
Or we can lease it. The lease option, AT&T has a hardened facility in Kent. The equipment will actually be there, the main servers and whatnot, with simply phones and screens and minimal equipment out at the Justice Center and these other dispatch centers. That's the lease option, where AT&T takes care of the major equipment, provides upgrades as necessary, that type of thing. Again, my purpose of this meeting was not to ask the commissioners to decide, but to begin moving the commissioners into what information do you need and what are you comfortable with, because the rest of the county is leaning very heavily towards us holding the contract, with the idea being that they will give up their 911 funds and sign a contract stating that should their share of costs ever exceed that portion, they would cover it out of their
Not
agreements.
to be contradictory, really, but I don't know as though you say the rest of the county. There's only, in the meeting last week, there was just Streetsboro, that the officer, the chief, acting chief, has always been there.
Yes, and
There was Aurora.
those are the
But
2
then
main that are ready.
there was another entity, was that Garrettsville?
I believe they were there.
See,
They're
we
a
don't even-
dispatch center.
But so it's not at this point, the rest of the county.
It's not the
Then
entire county, you are correct.
Right.
The key
So
is,
we need to-
yes.
Yeah, we need to know.
Well, we don't need the whole county on board, though, to do what we're doing.
No, but if it's one PSAP.
Well,
Is that a
yeah.
possibility, one piece?
No, it's not, because
I don't believe so.
Ryan found out that it's not. They would not count it as one.
Well, not just the machine. And there's a lot getting,
What he found
Again.
out was the hosted solution.
Yeah.
And if it were the one, the sheriff has real concerns about that.
Yes, he does. I know that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but yes.
sorry, go ahead.
Well, these questions need answered. And if the sheriff has concerns, he needs to bring them to you,
Right,
express
right,
those concerns in finite ways of exactly what concerns
Yes.
him so that they can be addressed on the other side. If you have financing concerns, they need spelled out so that we can begin getting you answers that address that. This was first brought to me in October of last year. The AT&T presented their figures March 31st to the broader group. So while it seems rushed, this has been a year in discussions. And again, many of those discussions are leaning towards the county doing what we're proposing with hosting. If the county is not comfortable with that, I think it needs to quickly either decide it is comfortable or no, it's not comfortable, and express that.
If the county were the one who host this contract, what assurances do you need? Maybe that's from others? I guess
think
that's one of the
Maureen was saying
questions.
she needs the assurance that they're gonna give up their money plus be
Well,
invoiced for what
yeah,
else.
you know, a
That's
system
their
that,
part.
whatever I call it extraneous costs, there has to be a means to pay for that.
So
Well, that will
maybe
be our
a-
contract.
Maybe a memorandum, at this point, until
Oh,
the state makes its decision, I'm calling it a memorandum of understanding
Yeah.
between Aurora, Streetsboro, whoever else, the other
Whoever else is gonna
PSAPs,
go.
a memorandum of understanding saying, if, whenever the state makes its decision, if the county hosts it, we will give up our 911 money
Sure.
and we will contribute for whatever overruns there are.
And
Um,
and
I mean,
again,
if
the
that-
people that were,
Maybe that would help.
Can we
Yeah.
start that, Todd?
Absolutely, and I will point out the contract that we are trying to work out with AT&T, if the county would do this, does not specify a number. In other words, we're not promising 17 seats. So if Ravenna did not join, that would not come back to the county,
Okay,
because we would not be liable for paying for their spots.
okay.
That's why I say we don't necessarily need everyone on board.
no, I think, you know, we certainly have to me, I think what we call moral or ethical obligation. Again, depending on how many PSAPs
Yeah.
the state is going to dictate to try to help meet their needs. But we have to do it to.
I don't
at
think
all
anyone-
costs to protect, you know, us from having to, you know, incurring the costs for all those.
Okay, can that be a starting point then? I mean,
Well, we
nothing else?
we have some points, I think we should list maybe by bullet point what we do know, which isn't all that much, but, and get that to the jurisdictions. Now, the 911 committee has not met.
Right.
And we were going to do that, actually, after we had some answers from the state, because then, in these discussions with the users, what has come up was, who's going to incur all the work associated with the county then being the, I guess, the
Probably
program.
Todd.
Right, Todd, yeah. No, au contraire, au contraire. And also, if the plan would have to be changed, we have a plan in existence, but that may have to be changed.
If you're reducing PSAPs,
Well,
it's going to
yes,
have to
now,
be changed, yeah.
Mahoning County, which seems to be referenced in a lot of these meetings, evidently has by the users anyway, has a very attractive program. I don't know if they have a tax, if they impose it, whatever they have to pay for it, but they also have a 911 coordinator who works for the EMA director. They have only one PSAP, and that's, as I understand it, that's the county.
That was brought up before, a 911
Right,
coordinator,
well,
but we were
but.
waiting, right?
Right, and we haven't even, we wouldn't, you know, we haven't gotten to that point. Because right now, the EMA director does the 911 coordination, but that may be something that we want.
But I
Does-
think that's gonna be too much.
Is Mahoney's a hosted one, or is it owned?
Mahoning
Yeah.
is currently hosting.
Yeah.
All the separate old PSAPs did turn their money. They have one
Right.
lump of money.
Operative word, turn their money.
They did enact extra funding as well. I don't know whether it was imposed or voted on, but they do have an additional source as well to do that with. And again, that may be a model we're working towards or not, I don't know. The key is what we need to even begin that move.
I think the first thing we have to do is find out where the state is, because it is just a short period of time. We need to hear from them, because they decide what we have to do.
And I
what the
believe that's
guidelines
true,
are.
but I think we have to have a plan B in case they don't decide soon. I mean, I think, I
Well,
understand. that.
somewhere
Yeah.
along the lines, I think maybe all of you mentioned, we should be meeting with the sheriff.
Yes.
And after the meeting was kind of quasi that way, but I think it would be very good to have him come in and meet with us as a full board.
And my recommendation is for the commissioners and the sheriff and Ryan
Yes.
to get this hashed out before we go to the communities.
Okay, before we even ask for their commitment
Yeah,
from you or whatever.
and then say to the communities, here's what we're willing to do, are you willing to agree
I
to
see.
it?
Okay.
Right now to say, this is the information we have, what do you think?
No,
It's
more confusion.
very disjuntled.
Yeah.
And we may not have to get all of that in a legally binding contract until the state makes up its mind, considering what you're saying there, Kathleen. But we can do that as a memorandum of standing that basically says, when the state makes up its mind, this is what we'll do.
Okay.
Well, the thing is, if the state comes up with some money for us,
That would be nice.
to say, you have to buy all this new equipment, et cetera, the state's going to give us money to do that. That's a whole different option than having a host. The idea of having a host is kind of an interim kind of thing, till we decide, until the state decides what we have to do.
The state's traditional stand, though, has been, that's what your 911 money was for, was to save up to buy your new equipment.
Okay, so
So
you're not looking
the
for
state, the
to
state
give us
feels
more
they
money.
have given us money.
Okay.
Of course,
From what
that
I've heard.
money- that may
From what I've
hopefully
heard.
make me-
And we do have, I mean, we have an allocation, as do the other communities. The
Right.
key is it's not cost effective to try and continue purchasing this
But in
equipment
our
under the
county,
current
that money
restraints.
was able to be used for personnel costs.
We have used some of it. We currently have around $300,000. Well, it's around $250 right now.
Okay, well, let's start with a meeting with the commissioners, the sheriff, and Ryan. So that's a good starting point, right? Can we set that up, Amy?
We have to find out from the state also, so we do that.
Right. Oh, if we can,
Right. Well, we have no finite from the state yet.
right.
But
But they did hire someone, that's a good thing, about 2 months ago maybe, they actually hired a director.
it's taken them 2 months though to.
Well, I wasn't in on this last year, but I remember the first meeting I went to, it was like any day the state's going to tell us something, and that
Yeah.
was in January, February.
In the
Well, they're getting
meantime,
there, they're working on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Should it be an hour, half hour?
Probably an hour.
I would think an hour.
Now, are you two saying, though, that we shouldn't set this meeting up until we hear from the state, or can we set this meeting up?
No, I think we should try to get the
Okay.
information.
Okay.
Yeah, we should, I think we should
If
meet
possible,
here, the
try to
sheriff.
get it, so we have it at the
Okay.
meeting.
All right. Well, that's a starting point, anyway.
Because the only reason we'd want to do a hosting is if we can't move forward with, and meet the state guidelines. At least know what our options are, acquire equipment for the sheriff. I'm very hesitant to be the host for the entire county unless I understand a lot more about it, because there's a lot of liability there. And I'm just saying, why would we want to do it? I mean,
I would only ask that I be part of that meeting only in terms of, I can think, being aware of all of this
Yes,
and being
we
apprised,
need
I
to
can
be-
think ahead of kind of agreements do we need, what kind of subcontracts do we
Right,
need,
right.
and I can just
We
anticipate
want you
those
in
things.
every meeting, you know that. And Todd, we want you in every meeting, too.
I think back to the point, why would we want to do it? I think we'd want to do it because of when you think of the fact that these are all first responders in their communities, police, fire, and that they don't have a way to do this.
well, the key is if we truly have to have one contract,
Right,
I feel the county is in the best position to hold that
Yes.
contract. That
Right.
doesn't mean there aren't concerns that need addressed.
right. There's a
That
way
makes
to
the
do
most
that.
sense.
Yeah.
There, whether we could try and push AT&T to multiple contracts, I don't know yet. Again, we haven't really talked to AT&T because
We don't know.
we haven't known the board's
Yeah,
wishes in
right.
terms of even beginning that conversation. So at least we're beginning getting the commissioners to where you can make choices, and that's a
It
good
seems like
thing.
everybody else is talking to AT&T.
A lot, and that's what I'm saying. That's what was one of my concerns at all these
Yeah, right,
meetings is, well,
right.
wait a minute, you guys are making all these decisions. But
Also
it's-
note, though, that
not to
whoever's
the people that
talking
need to make
from
it.
AT&T is their person who's not a decision maker on AT&T's part either.
Correct.
I'm not going to
Sure,
delegate
no,
him
no,
as,
understood.
or relegate him to a salesman position, but
Right, understood.
he's getting
Good
his
point.
orders from upstream as well, so he's not the deciding entity
Sure.
any
Very
more
good
than
point,
your.
And I believe Mahoning, Summit County, or Stark County, I mean, and there's one other close, have done this or signed contracts to do it, and
Oh.
they were single contracts.
Oh.
AT&T did stick to that on at least those two.
The only other
Examples.
part I'll throw in my 2 cents is, because you asked me to be here, so I'm going to throw in my 2 cents is, I just caution buying this kind of equipment because it's updated every 30
Yes,
days.
yes,
And
absolutely.
so, I mean, that kind of technology is updated constantly, so getting a vendor like AT&T to commit to whether it's 5 years or 3 years, at least at that point you're committing to them
Sure.
giving you those updates
Right.
along with that contract. So I would just throw that into
Yeah,
the
they're very good,
equation.
very valid points.
And I think in
Yeah.
the future meetings, probably all three commissioners should be there.
You know,
Absolutely.
that's fine,
Yeah,
but I didn't call the meeting, Ryan
yeah, I understand.
informed me afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah, and Ryan is your
Yeah, what
911
happened-
coordinator right now,
So
so.
what happened
that's why
is
he's
that some people, like Streetsboro and Aurora, were meeting, well, they have meetings in Streetsboro, they have meetings other places. So it was a small group of people that were meeting to try to decide what they were going to recommend, so maybe that's why it happened.
And it's grown, yeah, every community has to decide what to
Right,
do,
right.
and
Yeah.
Well, it's integral, it's very important to every,
Yeah.
exactly, every community, of course, they'll have their first responders involved, so.
Which is, I'm sure, why the debate at the state
Yes.
level. Do we
Yes.
get all the communities making their own
Right,
decisions, or
right.
just one decision in each county? Or should we make it for all the
Right, and
counties?
that's, I think that's the
At the
state's
state level.
posture, but the state needs to clarify to us
Yeah,
too,
they do.
what options
You're right.
we have. So we're going to set the meeting with Ryan and with the sheriff.
I will not be in town August 1st, or July 31st through August 8th, which is a Saturday,
Me
but,
too. I'll be gone then also.
so that'll work.
Okay,
Just
so
so you
we're
know.
back
First
up
weekend
to
of
when you're
August.
here.
Yeah.
It's okay to push it out then.
Push it
Yeah.
back.
Where's the one Hilton have?
Ah, okay.
Close.
Close, yes.
Okay,
Outer Banks, the northern tier,
nice.
yeah.
Be careful for the shark.
I'm not going anywhere. Whatever house the family has rented that has a pool, that's the only water I'm going in. I'm not going in. I may sit in the sand, but I'm not going in.
did you see the shark there that they had, you know, on the beach?
Oh, yeah, they're,
Then they let him go, or her.
yeah, they did. Oh, no.
Thanks so much, Todd.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Alrighty. Have a good
Thanks.
day.
All that stuff.
Thank you, Todd, I know you've been very
I really believe we need to move you
concerned
on
and
this
very
subject.
diligent.
Thank you, no.
You know.
Okay,
I'll come and
all
visit.
right. Would you like to come up?
Well,
You want to talk about PSAPs?
Yeah, right,
Paul stepped out for a second.
sure.
Okay.
Well, you're both welcome to come up, and Paul, when he gets back here.
Is he coming back?
I'm not sure what he had to go do.
Maybe he had a meeting.
What?
I said maybe Paul had a meeting, I don't know.
Oh, he's not coming back?
He's out.
No,
Yeah. Go and see, he maybe just.
Oh, here he is, okay, that's good.
Yes, I'll make a motion to go into executive session for personnel matters.
That was seconded.
Any further discussion? If not, roll call.
Vicki?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes. I have so many packets of. Authorizing an increase for an engineering division manager of the Portage County Department of Water Resources effective July 30th, I believe, and it is a 5%. We are authorizing a 5% increase for a water monitoring division manager of the Portage County Water Resource Department. We are accepting the resignation of the MIS coordinator for the Department of Job and Family Services effective August the 7th.
And then the last thing is you're approving the job description for JFS secretary and
Oh,
redlining
yes,
the
thank you.
salary of the incumbent.
Yes. And that one is, let me discuss where that is.
I'm sorry, that one, That one was an
Yeah,
add-on, so.
that was an add-on, okay. So whatever he just said, we are authorizing.
I'm sorry, it's number 8. If you, do you have a number 8?
Okay, go to the next page.
Amy,
It's
do you have
open-
a copy of
Open
this?
session.
She's got mine, but I'll grab it from her.
Okay. Yes, all right, the executive position presented by, and it doesn't say that on here, but we're freezing that wage
Right.
of that, of the executive session, executive assistant of Job and Family Services. Okay. That's a journal entry.
Yes.
Is there a
I'll make
motion?
a motion for journal entries.
Is there a second?
I thought we were doing them all at the end. Are we?
Don't we usually do
Yeah.
that? I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know.
Oh, all right.
It's fine, the journal entries are fine.
Okay, then we'll go ahead, open session. You have
So there was four
Thanks, Kelly
or
Jo.
five, no, five from closed session.
There are actually 4. You have 2 merit increases, a resignation, and the approval of that job description and redlining the salary. Now, you're free to go.
Thanks, Don.
Yeah, thank you.
Was that resignation Ryan Smith or Brian?
Brian.
Brian.
That's what I thought.
In open session, and this is a discussion you had with Jeff Lonsrick last week, to authorize a new position authority of Engineering Technician 1, and he submitted a job description with that. That job description is not being changed, so I don't know if you want to, do you need to see that?
Not if it's the same as
Okay.
it's been.
Then the only other thing that I would need to give you some paper on is the job description of the employee benefits specialist. Well, before we go on to that, I don't know if you want to discuss adding the position authority. Apparently, you've already discussed that.
We did with you.
Okay, so the journal entry would authorize the addition of the position authority and authorize that position to be posted.
Engineering technician 1.
Right.
Okay, we will add that to journal entries. Okay, and you're going to get us the job descriptions of the employee benefits specialist?
Right, and I have that right here. I have a red line version and a finished version. I don't know which one you'd like to.
The red line.
You want,
Some copies?
if you could.
Yeah, we'll have to have copies so we'll have a chance to review.
It has to be in color copier, right?
It's not in color. I mean,
How are we gonna know?
I
the
can
red
get you,
line
if you want to wait a minute, I can go downstairs and get the color version.
Oh, how do we know?
don't
Can we
yeah,
tell from
wait-
there? Is
wait
it
till we get
Oh,
it.
it's underlined.
Right.
It's
Oh,
underlined.
okay, it's okay, black and white.
Well, we have to get going here because we need to be in, Jogga County. Go ahead.
The Human Resources Department Employee Benefits Specialist is as you know, was originally factored as a bookkeeping job. Basically, that job was simply to pay the bills and keep records of employees who are out. The incumbent in that position now operates at a much higher level than that. She runs our ADA program. She runs our FMLA program. And she assists employees with dealing with all of the voluntary benefits as well as the health care plan. And because of that, we refactored it from a DAT 5 to a DAT 6. And as you know, in closed session, we discussed the pay raise. This particular job description has now been amended to reflect all of those additional duties that she does. And when you see this, you'll see it's fairly extensive changes.
I'm just curious, how did it become, or as you described it, a bookkeeper from the inception? I mean, that was the position?
When I went and looked at the original job description, I realized that this was planned out as a bookkeeping job, simply somebody who paid the bills when they came in and kept records of employee absences.
Okay. And
That's when she was in Job and Family Services,
No,
right?
she wasn't.
this is-
No, this
no,
is a
this
different
is
employer.
How did that, well, how did that happen, or how did it just was advertised as a bookkeeping
It's designed, it was originally designed as a bookkeeping job because, for example, you have employees who go out on FMLA leave. Somebody has to keep track of that.
But, you know, the interesting thing is, I've always perceived that, or maybe the person, that position, as being the benefits, if you will, coordinator, or, and doing all of that. I've never had, I guess in my mind, a perception that was anything other than that. That it was, now, I'm not going to demean bookkeepers, but that it was more than a,
Right.
tracking of this one is doing that and is at this pay range.
And the incumbent in this position also, operates at a very high level. She proposes changes to the plan design,
Correct.
which you know of, and deals with our benefits consultants and our brokers. It's a much higher level job than a bookkeeper.
And Paul has for a very long period of time, so maybe I'm remiss in not ever looking at a job description. I would, there I go again, assumed that it was commensurate with what the person, the performance of the job duties. So how long has that been going on?
Since I've been here. I mean, she's operated at that high level since I've been here.
This is the first that I understood that. I mean,
Yeah.
Why is it redlined?
That's just to show you that this shows you the deletions and the
Oh,
additions.
I see, redline addition.
Right.
I was thinking
Do you have,
redline
is it red
salary.
on yours or just black?
no, it's not red.
No, okay.
And I can get you
No,
the
it's
actual.
underlined, yeah, right, okay.
If you look at this, you'll see almost everything on the first page is new, and the new stuff continues up to the first third of the second page. And you'll see some other stuff there that's also new. The other thing I wanted to point out is that with the dawn of the Affordable Care Act, the incumbent in this position has undertaken new duties, even without my asking her to. She has dealt with the PCORI fee, the transition fees, and at the end of this year, we'll be developing our response to the requirement to file the IRS Forms 1094 and 1095. Beginning this year, we are required to file what are essentially W-2s for every employee stating forth their access to health care, and she's undertaken that project too. So not only is she doing higher level work, she's also doing more work.
Have you been aware of this the whole time you've been here, Paul? I mean, that you've been operating at a much higher level?
Well, when I got here, she operated at a high level, and then as the ACA came into play and she was doing more and more things, and then I decided to go back and look at the job description, and I had never read the job description before, and that's when I realized that it was really a low-level bookkeeping job as described in the job description.
Because I think she knows she's been operating at a higher level.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, do you want to review this, and on
Yes.
Thursday, we can officially accept it and consider it for you guys? Okay.
If you don't have any other questions, that's the last thing on my agenda.
Now, the revised job description of the executive assistant, is that another one? Or?
You
Yeah,
just
that was the one we just did.
exactly.
Oh, I thought this was for the employee.
No,
This was the first season,
that was the one we did for job and family. Yeah, the
Okay,
other one was jobs and
okay.
family, today's journal entries.
Okay, gotcha.
Have we,
So we'll do this on Thursday?
Yeah, I knew who this one was
Yes.
for. I just thought there was another
We'll,
one.
yeah, we'll take action on Thursday. Well, I think you're referencing the other, Paul in the executive session had asked for a merit increase for another employee in HR. But we said, I thought we said we were going to review that.
Right,
and
right.
So really, we only have these before us,
Okay.
today's journal entries.
I'm meeting for job, I need the address, it's not on here.
Is it not at the commissioner's office?
Yeah.
Okay.
But there
I
are
just-
two
yeah.
places where they met. One time I went up and I got in the wrong spot.
Did you
This
have
is
that
in their
original
offices, which is-
copy? Are you holding that one? That original?
Okay, so as we're concluding, is there a motion for journal entries for HR as we,
So moved.
A second?
any Further discussion or clarification? If not, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, that is HR.
We should try to do the resolutions.
Yes, yes.
Wait, it's Thursday?
No, this one they did today.
Okay. And posting? Oh. Didn't I give you one for posting?
Yeah, you gave me one for the posting, but they didn't handle it.
Okay. So that one's coming back.
That'll have to go on Thursday. And that's what Donna was anticipating.
Okay. This is an ASAP, so we weren't sure.
Right.
Right.
We
Because of
have
time.
those.
But this is, yeah.
Okay, so we just moved in, something to
Resolution.
include the journal entries for today's HR.
Okay.
Okay,
And we need to do these as
Yeah.
well.
so,
The
okay, then,
resolutions, right.
yeah, time-wise, can we roll right into the resolutions, or do we
Yes.
need?
Okay.
I'm
Make a
good.
motion, make a
Okay.
motion to approve the Tuesday, July 14, 2015 bills, ACH payments as presented by the county auditor and reviewed by the Department of Budget and Financial Management.
Second the motion.
Any discussion? If not, roll call, please, Amy.
Vicki?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Motion to approve the Tuesday, July 14, 2015 journal vouchers as presented by the county auditor and reviewed by the Department of Budget and Financial Management.
A second?
Any further discussion? If not, roll call.
Vicki?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Motion to approve the Tuesday, July 14, 2015 then and now certification as presented by the county auditor.
Second?
Any further discussion? If not, please indicate acceptance by saying aye.
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 Motion to accept the donations to the office of the Portage County Dog Warden.
Second?
Any further discussion? I just think it was a very generous contribution of like $200, was it, or $400? And then 40. But anyway, we'll acknowledge that. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, discussion items. This is, the first is a
Three.
request for the use of the courthouse
Oh,
spa.
yeah.
We would add
Journal.
that, and they do not have insurance, but we'll add that to the journal entries
Mhm.
today.
The second one we've already done.
Yeah. And the second, I believe we,
We did.
when Jim exited, we
Jim.
decided we would authorize
Jim
that by
Shea,
journal
yeah.
entry.
Mhm.
And the third is there's a public hearing or meeting being held in Ashtabula County. I would assume if you're interested in attending that you'll do that and make reservations or whatever their procedure is. Injection was it? Oh, and the next, I believe, is what we talked with Denise about.
Right.
So do we want to actually draft a resolution or?
Well, I think we were going to contact Hiram Township. Is that what
And
we're
ask
going to
them,
do?
right,
And
their
ask-
trustees,
Right.
and then try to arrange this
A meeting,
meeting.
right.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah, do we have a resolution in here?
I don't
don't have
do
it.
that.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we could go ahead and pass that resolution.
You must see it.
Yeah. I don't have it. And we've got another resolution here
That
also.
one's a mistake.
This was a mistake?
Yeah, the B on there has
Okay.
already been adopted.
Okay.
Turn the page.
Okay.
It's already done.
Okay, I move to agree to meet with Heckman Water Resources, CVR, Inc., to discuss the injection well located on Allen Road, TH 281, Lot 11, in Hiram Township. And we're also going to be meeting with the Hiram Township trustees. That's going to be an open meeting, right? I mean, it's advertised and everything, Portage County.
Well, yes. So that's part of the resolution?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a second?
A second.
Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, are we doing the RUMA now, or we're going to have the meeting first?
That B has already been
Yeah,
adopted.
it's-
Yeah,
Mhm.
all right.
Yeah.
So it's
Draft resolution,
Yeah,
it says,
no, we do.
to enter into a roadway use.
Yeah,
agreement.
that's a mistake.
Yeah.
Okay, and we have an acceptance on the part of Mickey Marazzi to serve on the
Right.
TID,
Right,
and also from Mayor Braska from Streets Board.
right.
Do we want to add those to journal entries today?
Sure.
Okay, we'll do that.
Okay, do we have a
The
resolution?
next two, I think the first one was the resolution on behalf of the
I think I've got
District
this.
Library.
This
Oh, yeah,
discussion
the
seven.
7th.
Okay. So,
I'll make a motion to declare the necessity of and placement of an additional 1.0 mill levy on the ballot for November 3rd, 2015 general election in Portage County for the benefit of the Portage County District Library for current expenses pursuant to Section 5705.23 of the Ohio Revised Code.
A second.
any further discussion? If not, let's do it by roll call.
Vicki?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes. And the next one is just to, on a temporary basis, appoint Mary Helen Smith, the Environmental Health Director for the Health Department, to temporarily replace Mr. Porter on the NEFCO Policy Board.
I think that's a good
There's a
idea.
meeting, is it tomorrow?
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea.
Is
Pardon,
that
do I
okay?
need to do a resolution, or, okay?
Okay, so we will, are we doing this by resolution or journal
Yeah.
entry?
This is
Resolution,
right here.
okay.
Okay,
Um,
is there a motion?
Make a motion for the interim appointment to the Northeast Ohio Four-County Regional Planning and Development
Thank you.
Organization, NEVCO. Do I need to name her, or
That'd be a good idea.
to appoint Mary Helen Smith, Environmental Health Director for the Portage County Health Department, to temporarily replace Chip Porter on the NEVCO Policy Board?
I second the motion.
Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And the journal entries, if you have looked those over, and I
Yes.
all right to a motion for the journal entries for today?
Yes, I'll make a motion for the journal entries, please.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there anything else to come before us today, before we depart for Geauga County?
Nope.
Okay, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I second the motion.
Any further discussion on adjournment? If not, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Shall we all go together up to Geauga? I will let you drive.
Thank you.
I've got another appointment after this, so I'll have to drive separate, so I'll follow.
You want to ride with me then?
Well, I was going to drive